Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here. It is Monday, December 18th, 2023, and I want to talk about combat, not in the way that you may be thinking. So, we've been talking a lot about how to invest and where to invest, and the big global scheme of what I'm going to call global unified communism versus a we the people type of approach where the money, the power, the control, the wealth, the upward mobility really is in the hands of communities and we the people. And so, as we look at these big multinational globalist enterprises like BlackRock, who we've talked about, Vanguard, and companies like them, who tend to take, not universally, but overwhelmingly, and by intention and by stated goal, they're really steering into the mega globalist types of companies. And that really, it hurts small business and small business enterprise. And at the same time, we've talked about the downward pressure on small community regional banks. It's actually the thumb screws are tightening, and regional banks are having a more and more difficult time even staying alive, much less lending to local small business. So, as we've talked about, my intention is to create a seed funding sort of environment where we can take that money that we might otherwise put into those big multinational globalist woke sorts of investment managers who then buy the big multinational globalist enterprises like the ones that we've been talking about, the ones that you keep reading about being boycotted. And by the way, as a side note, I still advocate instead of boycott, vote your values, which means simply if you are where you're shopping, think in terms of the values of the place where you're giving your money. If it is some place like Target or one of those big retail types of shops, think about the corporate stance because if the corporation, if the entity that's collecting the profit from you doesn't appear to value American freedoms and liberties, then why spend your money there? Don't. So that I call the spent dollar. And when I say dis the left, remember DIS, dis the left, know where you donate, invest, and spend. That's the spend piece of that. That's where you're going and giving your money because where you give your money, they can then take that profit from business and they can use it against us. And many big globalist companies do. They're actually using our money directly to violate our freedoms and liberties. A great example is the oppressive actions taken against people who were not taking the jab. Those are companies that should be avoided. But when it comes to your invested dollars, you have choices. And my plan is to expand those choices exponentially. So it's not simply a matter of the big globalist company investing in other big globalist companies, all of whom, by the way, this weird myriad mix of sort of uh, nepotism. They all kind of seem to own each other. Like, did you know that, to best of my understanding, big chunks of BlackRock are owned by Vanguard, and big chunks of Vanguard are owned by BlackRock. They own each other. And the same thing with many of these big banks. So as they sort of crush small business by shutting off credit and lending to small businesses, and I expect that to get much, much, much worse the more we sort of flirt with this global communism that's trying to manifest itself. But let's focus for a moment on the invested dollar. So maybe instead of simply moving all of our money out of the big woke globalist company that's invested in other big woke globalist companies, maybe we can find a couple of different options. And I've touched on this a few times in the past. And boy, did it really come home for me a few days ago. And it looks like this. We're out there scouring and looking for good companies that are solid, that are patriotic, that really work to support our freedoms and liberties. They publicly come out in support of things like our First Amendment, our Second Amendment, the freedom of liberty, freedom of religion, and etc. So there are companies out there that are doing a great job of fighting back and advocating for we the people. And by all means, we want to invest in them. Uh, it, Speaking of which, by the way, if you haven't already checked them out, we've done exposés on those companies that are pulling their ad dollars from the social media platform Twitter, now X, because simply effectively because X is allowing free speech. So the pressure is on those big globalist companies to pull their massive ad dollars to try to crush free speech effectively. It's awful stuff. And we're exposing them. And I am encouraging everybody to get every penny you've got out of those companies. Do not, please, 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 do not support those companies that are fighting. They're fighting directly against American interests and the West. The whole concept of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, etc., is in jeopardy. Um, so there are those companies out there that are fighting and advocating for the good things, and invest in those. Some of them are publicly traded, but here's where it gets really interesting and exciting. I've talked before about using those same dollars to redirect into communities, into small business ventures and startup capital, seed money, and micro lending to uh, e- everything under the sun. Every kind of business you can imagine should have a good, viable funding source. And instead of waiting around for some new bank to come out or the newest version of savings and loan, why don't we, the people, take the reins in our own hands and decide, instead of funding the woke globalist leftist agenda of ESG, that stands for environmental, social, and governance, and CBDC, that stands for centralized banking, digital currency, instead of funding that migration into that awful woke stuff, why don't we yank our money out of there and use it to fund things in our own communities, to be the bank? Why don't we decide to become the bank? We can lend. We can do it. We can lend to those businesses. In my neighborhood, I see stuff opening up. For the past year, there's been a place under construction. I'm told it's going to be a farm to table, big restaurant with all kinds of stuff and local produce and everything. Spectacular. I love it. You can go in and get organic coffees and pastries and stuff, I imagine. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I know that they needed money in order to build the new structure, in order to create the aisles and get the carts that are going to be needed for shopping. That's a big outlay. And boy, wouldn't I love the opportunity to be one of the investors in that. Not in some little private club of 10 people who all get together $1 million each and then they hope to triple their money in 10 years and whatever. I'm not talking about that yacht club kind of mentality that exists all throughout finance. I'm talking about we, the people, just average small investors who have a little bit of money that we might put into an IRA or something, but instead of giving it to those big woke-a-doodles, the big woke far left managers, what if we had the opportunity to invest those dollars in small, emerging, possibly very profitable companies? I'm not suggesting any one company. What I'm suggesting is a big portfolio, a big community-based funding apparatus. And you can even make them, my first thought is county specific, and they can be anywhere. And so, what if you live in a county that has a lot of business potential? There's a lot of, let's say, I'm in the Midwest, so there's a lot of mechanical skill around here, machine shops, people that have been around for generations doing work in metals and refinery, pardon me, all those kinds of things. And there's a great deal of skill. Wouldn't it be great to invest in some of those? and help them to become profitable. And one of the side notes and one of the amazing pieces of that is when people feel invested in their community and they can see they literally see the businesses that they're invested in, they feel a sense of community pride, much more so than giving money to BlackRock, who then invests it in Vanguard and then buys Target stock and whatever. That stuff isn't going to do much for us. In fact, I argue that it works against our interests. So, under this backdrop, imagine this is the thing that I've been working on with a lot of people. I'm having some very high level, massive, awesome national conversations about what this might look like and how to structure it, how to create the deal. Apparently, I'm losing my voice. I've been talking so much to all these people. But as I'm working on that, a few days ago, I was invited into an annual holiday party. And yes, this one I'm absolutely going to call a holiday party because the just spectacular, wonderful family that has owned this business for many, many decades now, multi-generational business. It's a Jewish family that have an incredible story that I only just recently learned about escaping Nazi Germany. And the way that they escaped, I've learned that the story is publicly available and it's incredible. I love it. So I'm not going to call that a Christmas party. It's a Jewish-owned, Jewish-founded company. They had their holiday party, and I was an invited guest to come and speak. And I'm honored to have been given the opportunity. And I met a bunch of really great people there. But it was actually after I left. So I met some people, enjoyed the party, and I left and was driving through a kind of an unfamiliar neighborhood. I've been there a few times, but don't know it well. And driving down the street, I've got the business card. I'm not going to mention this business by name because I don't actually have permission to, at least not yet. I'm driving along and I saw a self-defense combat sort of big facility, really big looking business. I was like, on a whim, I decided I had to go and look at what it was. And I went in, it didn't disappoint. This place looks phenomenal. Here's this guy who has an MMA, that stands for mixed martial arts, a fighting background. I know a little bit about that, but not as much as I think I would like to. But here's somebody that knows all kinds of martial arts and self-defense and those sorts of things that opened up a gym. Just decided he wanted to be able to give back to community and open this gym. And there's this office and a sprawling gym. It had actually had major, huge pieces to it. And of course, there are heavy bags and workout places, and there are pads everywhere. So people can go in and learn martial arts and self-defense, which I think is awesome. And then there's a separate room that's padded for wrestling and grappling. And so really this place includes a lot. You can learn boxing, boxing skills and different judo, taekwondo, different martial arts, and wrestling and grappling and all that stuff. I'm like, man, this is really cool. I love that this guy took it upon himself. He took a big risk and put, I presume, I didn't come across to me and hasn't mentioned, at least not yet in our few conversations, that he's independently wealthy. I think this is another one of those people pursuing an American dream who put everything on the line to rent a big space and put together an office and offer this thing to the community. And while I was there, just one of the most awesome, cool things happened. Two young men, I would say probably high school senior age. That's how they looked to me. So maybe 18-ish. These two young men came in and were awesome. They were all manners. They came in and you could tell immediately the level of respect they had for the man that I was talking to that started the gym. It was, yes, sir, no, sir. Just terrific manners. And you could tell there was like this palpable interest in learning from him. So they had to wait a little bit because he was distracted by talking to me. And they went into the gym, took their shoes off, and started to stretch and kind of prepare for a workout. But that whole thing got me thinking in all sorts of directions all at once. And one of them has to do with getting back to being okay with masculine and feminine. And what I mean by that is not what the left tries to present and miscreate, that somehow this oppressor oppressed thing that the left has created around those two genders, male and female, that's artificial and it's untrue. Historically, throughout history, yes, I acknowledge that there have been abusive men and there have been abusive of women, um, but the the predominance of society always has been equal, yin and yang, the equality of and the power, different but equal, between male and female, and teaching inner strength to both men and women. Yes, I do believe that masculinity is arguably even more under attack than feminine, but both are. And that's the type of facility that teaches awareness, self-discipline, and power and strength to the core in both men and women. And it teaches masculinity in a healthy way. It teaches masculinity in that multi-generational respect for older men, wiser men, and it passes that on. And those are the types of places, I'm out on a limb here, but I'm going to keep going. Those are the types of places that fight back against the lure of like street gangs and those sorts of things. And they're a welcome, embracing, wonderful component of communities in broken homes. For young men who do not have a positive male role model around them, this is fundamentally critical. It's been written about and talked about for millennia that young men left alone without good positive male role model are really destructive in society. And a place like this gives that. So here's my point, and the reason that I brought it up specifically, I didn't actually ask anything. I didn't even mention that I work in finance. And I got a tour from this guy. He seemed to like where I was coming from, and I was really digging his availability to give me a tour of the place. But he has all these plans. He wants to build in showers and a much nicer facility for people to change and prepare locker rooms. And the part of it that is designed for wrestling, the mats are getting old, and he really wants to renew that and freshen it up, put more new lighting in because it's old. That old panel, it looked like it was fluorescent tube lighting. It's kind of inhospitable. It doesn't look modern. It's not really attractive. It's kind of harsh on the eyes. That's my interpretation. He didn't say all those things about the lighting, but he did say that he really wants to freshen it up. And then he said something heartbreaking to me. Local lending institutions are writing him off. They won't lend to him. I think he said three have accepted the paperwork and said that everything looks good and the numbers look good, and then have come back and denied him. I think that's the environment we're in. And I'm guessing that it may have a lot to do with the type of business it is. So in this environment, when you've got a business that caters to strength, that might nurture young men and young women, that is a community resource, that has that appearance. Remember, we're thinking on the virtue signaling side, the left, like they like to think that they're just going to jam virtue down everybody's throat by dissecting and lopping off huge parts of society, like gyms. I think in that environment, it's nearly impossible for a place like that to borrow money in order to expand, market themselves, rebuild, get new mats, all those kinds of things that are a great opportunity. So what if, going back to the beginning, what if we created an environment where that business and hundreds and thousands of businesses like it were all part of a community pooled investment vehicle where people could choose to put their money in and hope for return. I want to be honest about what that looks like. There are businesses out there. I hope that this guy continues to thrive and grow and expand, and a lot of people come in, go in there and find the things that they need to be good, well-rounded, um, self-sufficient, all those great things that come. I can't even apply enough adjectives. Great young people and go on to very successful lives. And a lot of people who have a good exercise and workout regimen do that. But some of the businesses in this big portfolio that I envision of micro, small, local community lending, some of them aren't going to survive. We know that. Some are going to close. The point is to build a big portfolio of opportunity. And some of those, all it takes in that time, that kind of portfolio, is it just takes a few of them to grow, thrive, and prosper. And then we, the people, not the banks this time, the banks make massive money off of gambling on the growth of potential new small business. But this time, maybe we bypass the banks and bypass all of that infrastructure that goes into listing agencies and all the lawyers and everything that take these big companies public, and they just suck all the money out of them, all the venture capital types of groups and structures. Maybe we can create something that is capital intensive for small business and potentially very rewarding for the people who choose to invest in those communities, and has the added benefit and bonus of drawing attention to those communities. Because think about it, if you're invested in a whole bunch of small businesses near you, you feel a sense of attachment to those. And then you start to pay closer attention to all the infrastructure. That means police, fire, electric grid, roads, transportation, you name it. You want every piece of the ingredients for success in that community. More on that later. Thanks for listening. This has been Jonathan Broadbent with another episode of UnWoke.Academy. Stay tuned for the next exciting episode.